we're going to hear about organizing and building a movement. Oh, si necesita traducción este lugar allá. So we're going to be talking about organizing and building a movement. Personally, that's my favorite part. So we're going to hear some inspiring examples of building power, building workers' power, building the power of ordinary people, building the power in our communities. And we'll hear some practical ideas about how to jumpstart this movement. My first introduction, I'm going to give my two favorite hats for this person, who has many, many hats. My two favorite hats are co-chair of the Oregon Working Families Party and also member of Jobs and Justice's Workers' Rights Board, Barbara Dudley.
Those are my two favorite hats, too. Okay. First, I want to thank the people who pulled this together, because it's obvious from looking around that this was something that needed to happen, and they figured it out. So to Lori, to the program committee, thank you. And thank you for what I consider to be a great beginning of what's going to be an incredible movement. We heard from Marty at the beginning of this session this afternoon just how inevitable the financial collapse was. But what we need to remember is that we knew that this economic model would fail. We knew it when Ronald Reagan's administration first went to work, cutting taxes, shrinking the public sector, eviscerating social services, busting unions. We knew it, but back then, in the early 80s, we were immobilized. We watched PAC go, we watched taxes drop from 70% down to 28% for the richest Americans. We knew what was happening, but our movement was splintered and we were not ready to fight back. The Reagan administration was not subtle. They saw their mission as dismantling the New Deal, dismantling all the regulations and the safeguards and the programs that were put in place following the Great Depression. Those safeguards were put in place to forestall another Great Depression. And Reagan started the negotiations which, through the first Bush administration and then with Clinton, led to the WTO and NAFTA. As Lori reminded us when she first got up here at this podium, we met here in November of 1999 before heading to Seattle to confront the World Trade Organization. Because by then we had started to mobilize. We had begun to understand what was going on, and we had begun to get ourselves ready to stop the inevitable and make it not quite so inevitable. We knew the model would fail, and tens of thousands of us marched in Seattle in 1999 because we knew what would flow from the WTO, NAFTA, Reaganomics, Washington Consensus model. We knew factories would be moved overseas. We knew they would chase the lowest wages and the highest profits. We knew people at home would lose their manufacturing jobs, their living wage jobs. We knew they would be pushed into temporary part-time work, low-wage jobs. And it happened. And we started to have to pay for our health care, for our kids' college education with credit cards. We bought cheap junk at Walmart, which was made for U.S. corporations by Mexican workers and then by Chinese workers, with no labor protections, no health and safety standards, no environmental protections, and abysmally low wages. We became consumers on credit, enslaved by our debt, rather than citizens with jobs that were paid living wages. And the greatest irony was that our debt was underwritten by the Chinese trade surplus. But let's not forget that we knew this model would fail, and we fought against it, and we brought the WTO to a screeching halt. Don't forget that. organization that appeared to be the most powerful global institution on the planet. And then many of us went to Miami in 2003 and marched against the free trade area of the Americas. Remember that failed effort on their part? We stopped that one before it even got out of the box. And that happened because we met in places like this and we started to talk to each other about what were these things, these trade agreements. What did they have to do with us? We learned. We are capable of understanding our own economy and we are capable of rebuilding it. Something new. We know that. Marty, Veronica told us about that. We heard about that in all of the workshops we were just at. We need to remember that another world is indeed possible. As the WTO was reaching its impasse, brought about by us, by global civil society, those same civil society groups began meeting in the World Social Forum to talk about how to build a new world, how to find a new consensus to replace the so-called Washington consensus. And one thing that was repeated over and over in the World Social Forum meetings year after year was that the answer is in building local economies, in seeing globalization as a cultural and a civic phenomenon, not an economic imperative. We do not want to close ourselves off from the rest of the world. We want to open up with mutual respect. We want to learn from the rest of the world. But we don't want to approach the rest of the world as consumers. We want to approach as citizens of the world who create and control our own economy. So what does that mean for us here in Portland, Oregon? First of all, it means not to wait for the federal government. Even though we may have hope for change in our new president, we all know, even he knows, that for real change to happen, we have to force him to be bold.
Yes.
All eyes seem to be on Washington and the media, but there's a lot that we can do here at home. We know we need to start from the bottom up. We know we need to build a local economy. We have to stop giving away the candy store at home to lure businesses here. We can put our money in local banks, in Oregon chartered banks, and we can direct them to loan that money to businesses that pay living wages, that build affordable housing, and that serve the needs of people here at home. We can ask our state government, our local government, our county government to put their money in local banks and to control the behavior of those banks. We can build an environmentally and economically sustainable future with things that last. We can change our tax structure, pay for education, fund health care for all Oregonians, support local businesses and local farms. We have to work together in order to make this happen. We know we need to keep being together and meeting together and supporting one another in the work that we're doing and the things that we are learning. The model, perhaps, is the social forum model, where we don't have to build a new organization. We simply come together in our organizations and as individuals, and then go forth to do our work. And we join our forces together. If we can tear down the WTO, we can build our own economy. Yes, we can means yes, we can. And we need to get our legislators, local, state, and federal, to listen to us. We need to hold them accountable. We need to build something new together. Another world is possible.
Thank you, Barbara. And now, I'm going to introduce a militant, forward-thinking labor leader, Tom Leedham, Secretary-Treasurer of Teamsters Local 206. Tom is going to tell us about building worker power.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Well, I lost a close friend and ally recently when Ron Carey, the former president of the Teamsters, passed away about a month ago in December. And I thought it was appropriate that we talk about one of the biggest victories for organized labor in several decades. In 1997, Teamster members struck UPS, one of America's most powerful corporations, and won. There are lessons from that labor dispute that can be applied to our situation today. But to really understand the victory, we have to take a step back and look at events that preceded, by several years, the strike itself. The strike was won because it was waged much differently than other strikes. And more significantly, the Teamsters in 1997 was a very different union from what it had been. You've probably read or heard the stories of the Teamsters of the 60s, the 70s, the 80s, the Teamsters of Roy Williams and Jackie Presser, the stories of a mobbed-up union whose pension funds helped build Las Vegas with unsecured loans, a top-down business union that even endorsed Ronald Reagan and George Bush. Well, most of the stories are true. And it's also true that Jackie Presser was carried into the 1986 Teamster Convention on a sedan chair, all 350 pounds of it. In 1989, the Justice Department, through the U.S. Attorney of the Southern District of New York, filed a RICO action against the Teamsters, alleging that the union was being run for the benefit of La Cosa Nostra. The Teamsters General Executive Board ultimately agreed and signed a consent decree to avoid prosecution. Now, originally, the government intended to trustee the union, but a group of Teamsters, led by Teamsters for a Democratic Union, pushed hard. We pushed hard for direct election of top international officers. We said, give us democracy and the right to vote, and we'll clean it up ourselves. And we were successful. And Ron Carey was the first president elected by direct membership vote. Everything in the union changed in the next few years. Hundreds of corrupt officers had been removed. Members became involved in every aspect of their union, from organizing to contract negotiations. In 1995, we knew that UPS negotiations were going to be difficult, and Ron Carey was determined to make big improvements for Teamster members. We faced a number of challenges, not the least of which was a continuing internal conflict and very few financial reserves. Carey knew that a company as rich and arrogant as UPS would never agree to our demands without a fight. We quietly began preparing. And when you think of UPS, you generally think of brown trucks, we call them package cars, and the men and women who wear those brown shorts, sometimes even in the winter. The company has a reputation for high pay and good benefits, and while that's true, there's more to the story. The work is brutal, highly physical, and monitored and measured to a split second. The constant pressure on UPS employees is virtually unmatched. What the public doesn't see are the tens of thousands of employees that work inside the distribution centers and hubs, physically handling tons of freight every day. The work is exhausting, even for young workers who make up the majority. Injuries that are high, and so is turnover. These positions are mostly part-time. In fact, roughly 60% of all Teamsters at UPS are part-time. All of these factors resulted in a sense among UPS Teamsters that things would only get worse. And in fact, the company had significant goals of its own. They wanted out of the Teamster pensions, and unrestricted, they continued to grow the part-time workforce. The challenge for the union was to raise expectations among the members. This notion of raising expectations was risky, but we were convinced workers wouldn't fight for goals not worth fighting for. We began to organize around three main issues: creating full-time jobs from part-time jobs, a solid economic package for all Teamsters, and not just protecting, but improving Teamster pensions. Now, I won't spend a lot of time on the mobilization itself because so many of you in this room and your organizations are so very good at it. But for us, it was relatively new. Suffice it to say that the organization, both before and during the strike, relied heavily on Teamster members themselves. Our communications department did an excellent job of framing the issues and tapped into the public's respect for their UPS driver, while sounding the alarm about the general trend toward part-time employment with the slogan, "Part-time America won't work." Some of you may remember the spokesperson for the Teamsters during the strike, a young African-American woman named Gay Williams, who skewered UPS management every night on the evening news. Prior to Ron Kerry's election, you'd more likely have seen a defensive posture rather than the offensive strategy and actions pursued by the union. We weren't just taking action to protect and save things, we were striking to improve and win things. Woo! The victory at UPS resulted in a contract that few outside of the union could have anticipated. Record amounts were negotiated for wages and health care. The company abandoned their effort to take our pensions, and Teamster pensions were improved with large contribution increases. But most importantly, 20,000 part-time jobs were converted to 10,000 full-time jobs. As working people, the challenges we face in 2009 are enormous. Progressives must have felt the same way in 1933. How many would have anticipated at that time the positive changes like the National Labor Relations Act, or the Fair Labor Standards Act, or Social Security? How many would have thought those were even possible at the time? In 2010, we have more tools to organize in 2009 and mobilize more than ever before. We have the talent and the experience to know how to use those tools. Our demands must match the significance of the sacrifices and the risks that we ask of ourselves and others. Now is the time to raise expectations. Half-steps and watered-down proposals will not attract the support we need for meaningful change. If you believe in single-payer health care, and you believe that'll solve our health care crisis, then we should fight for single-payer and not offer compromise before we have it. We must support every effort to strengthen democracy, both democracy in our unions and democracy in our national and state government. Our opponents understand the value of controlling the rule book. Democratic reforms like public finance campaigns will level the playing field for average Americans. In about 1900, the original robber barons made fusion voting illegal in Oregon and most other states, ending a string of populist victories. Democratic reforms in the Teamsters were the first step in building power for rank-and-file Teamster members. Reforms like the restoration of fusion voting in Oregon will likewise build power for all Oregon citizens. This economic crisis, while painful, brings real opportunity for change. But at the same time, there is real cynicism among workers struggling to just get by. Many feel that the two major political parties only represent the interests of the rich and the corporations. Democratic reforms will, over time, make working people part of the decision-making, raising expectations around issues that clearly affect people's everyday lives gives them something worth fighting for. Organizing and mobilizing around those issues, as long as they're concrete issues, will build a generation of activists that will not easily give back what they've fought so hard to achieve. Thank you.
Just imagine the power of the working class in this country if we do things right and if we do things democratically. Imagine the power in our communities if we do things right and do things democratically. So that's an incredible message. And now I'd like to introduce David Bacon, who is a labor activist, a labor journalist, a photographer, and he will give us some ideas about how to put together movements and make our big movement happen.
Buenos días a todos y todos.
Buenos días.
I'm going to talk about racism because we've been talking about fighting all day today, fighting for the world that we want, and we have to be able to fight together. It's the only way we're going to be able to win. You know, Obama introduces recovery package into Congress last week, and right away a congressman jumped up and said, yes, but for any of those jobs that we're going to create, we have to show immigration identification first in order to get one. Who is entitled to the jobs of the recovery? You know, I can imagine they're saying anybody with a criminal record. What would that mean for all the young people in our Chicano, Black, and poor working class white communities where people are sent to jail for just things like marijuana possession or for relatively nothing? Who do these jobs belong to? Do they just belong to somebody? Do they just belong to anybody? Do they belong to some people first? Who gets to be first in line? You know, we have a detention center up there in Tacoma, and in that detention center are people who have been sent to federal prison for the crime of giving a bad social security number to their employer. And we have 12 million people in this country who don't have legal immigration documents. These are the people at the bottom of the workforce in wages whose jobs are most likely to be eliminated. We say that those people are ineligible for any jobs in their recovery. What kind of recovery is this going to be? You know, Columbia County just recently passed an ordinance saying if you don't have any papers, you don't have a right to a job. You can't work. And thank God, you know, ACLU and the courts in Columbia County have just enjoined that one. But we know what the history of this is. In the 1930s, hundreds of thousands of people were deported from the United States. Anybody that looked Mexican was put across that border regardless of where you were born or how many generations your family lived here. So the consequences of not dealing with this in a period of economic crisis can be very, very serious for us, and we need to take it seriously. You know, we know what the answer to the economic forces that cause migration are. We talked about this in our workshop today. You know, that NAFTA and the displacement of people from their communities in other countries is what is pushing people into that migrant stream towards the United States, and that the long-term answer is basically economic equality between the countries of the world, so that we don't have these huge differences in the standard of living. And that's something we need to work on. Let's not kid ourselves. In the short term, people are going to continue coming to this country and crossing that border. So the real question for us is, what status should those people have? Do we want equality here, or do we want a society divided into people, some people that have rights and other people that don't? That is the basic question for us. And that's the question in our unions. Are our unions going to fight for all workers or just some? Does everybody get to belong to our congregations or just some people? Are civil rights movements and our civil rights organizations just going to fight for one nationality or one race or for all of them? These are really basic questions for an economic recovery. So I think the basic answer for us is not just jobs and not just economics, it's jobs and rights. Jobs and rights. Whatever workforce is in our workplace, whoever those workers are, need to have basic rights. And it would be a lot better for us as a people if we spent the resources that we have on enforcing labor standards and minimum wages and overtime laws instead of immigration raids and demanding people's papers. If we're worried about the low price of immigrant labor, the low wages of immigrant workers, what is the answer we have always had to low wages?
Raise them.
Organize. You have to organize a union. You have to go out on strike. So we need things that will make organizing easier, like legal status for people that don't have it. And when they tell us that migration to the United States should come in the form of guest worker programs, people who are brought here by corporations with no rights, so that people can't join unions and can't go out on strike, we have to see that that's just not just a danger to those people themselves, but to anybody who wants to organize a union. Right now, in this country, the section of the workforce that is expanding the fastest is the section of the workforce that has the lowest wages and the least rights. So when we hear proposals in Congress that say, okay, a job recovery for some, but not for those 12 million people that don't have papers, then which direction is that going to go in? That's just simply making that whole process move even faster. So if we want an economic recovery that really does something for working people here, we have to push back in the other direction. We have to say, no, nobody's going to get left out here. So what could Congress and Obama do about this? Well, first of all, we need legalization. We need legal status and legitimate status for everybody who is here. We need to unite their families here. You know, we are a country that believes in families, and we all have families, and we all want to protect our families, and we all want to be together. So what sense does it make then that you have to wait for 11 years to petition your brother or sister if they live in Mexico City, or 17 years if your brother or sister lives in Manila? We have to make it easier for us to build strong families and strong communities here. And the idea that people are going to come here to reunite their families is not a threat to us, it's not a threat to our jobs, it is something that is going to make us stronger. We have to stop the deportations. We have to stop making the border look like some kind of military zone. We have to stop the fact that people die every year. Hundreds of people die crossing it. I have a real simple idea. What about letting anybody who wants one get a Social Security card? What sense does it make to say that 12 million people who can't show that green card can't pay into the system? I mean, when you get a Social Security card, what are you volunteering to do?
Work.
Give the government money, right? And then they're going to use that to pay people's pensions, to pay people's disability payments. We want people to participate in that system. What sense does it make to exclude people from it? We want jobs programs that are going to guarantee people's income. And if we have jobs programs and people really can go back to work in this country, then what we're doing is we are producing a system that produces security instead of insecurity.
Yes.
And that is the answer to that anti-immigrant hysteria and to that whole idea that we have to be afraid that if you get a job, I don't. The basic idea is that having a job is a human right. Working is a human right, and we all have to work to make a living to support our families. So we have to be able to fight for everybody's right to a job, and again, not just some. So what this really means is that we need to find the common ground between us, those things that unite us rather than divide us. Jobs programs unite us. Organizing rights unite us. Single-payer health care unites us. Immigration reform unites us. All of these things bring us together, and that's what creates the unity and the political force that's going to get the Obama administration to listen, to get our Congress members to listen, and if they don't listen, well, then we'll just go and find some other ones. So, kind of idealistic, you might say, right? Well, you know, think of what the world looked like in 1950 during the Cold War. It was pretty bad. And in 1965, what happened? The Bracero program ended. We had a civil rights movement sweeping the country. We had the Voting Rights Act. We had the Civil Rights Act. We had family reunification for immigrants. The United Farm Workers Union went on strike in Delano. So, you know, what do we say? We say, sit with it.
Building a movement to think of ways to find demands that pull different parts of our society together, because we need the unity. So also check out David's book. It's called, the new book, it's called Illegal People, How Globalization Creates Migration and Criminalizes Immigrants. Okay, bringing it all home to Portland, to neighborhoods, is Portland's own JoeAnn Bowman, Executive Director of Oregon Action, longtime peace and justice activist, and Hate personality. Welcome, JoeAnn.
Boy, you guys look beautiful out there. And I want to also thank you. I also want to thank the organizers. Clearly, this was something we had to do here at Portland. We had to do it because guess what? We are in control of our destiny. I so appreciate David speaking before me because he took so many of my talking points, and I want to really appreciate him being able to stand up here and talk about the need for us to be very intentional about race. Because we know that that's one of the things that folks use to divide us. And we are all suffering from this economic crisis, and we all have a role to play in building the kind of economy that works for us all. Right. And each of us has a role in figuring out what do we want our economy to be here in Oregon. We can't do it by ourselves. We can't sit in our union halls and talk among the union members and not connect to the broader community. We can't sit in our grassroots organizations and talk among ourselves and not connect to a broader movement. And so I want to challenge each and every one of you today to start that process today by making sure that when you're in a meeting that you say, who's missing from this room? What voice are we not hearing? I want to challenge you today to learn who your neighbors are and talk to them about their role in helping us to build the kind of economy we want in Oregon. I want to challenge you today to, when the economic stimulus dollars start flowing, I want to challenge each person in this room to say, how are we going to make sure that the lowest wage people in our community are able to benefit from these economic stimulus dollars? I want to challenge you today to say, where are the people of color in this process? I want to challenge you today to say, where are the women when we're talking economic stimulus? Because I got to tell you, as I've been listening to our governor talk, as I've been listening to our city council talk, I haven't seen me in their conversations. I haven't seen people that look like us in that conversation. The diversity in this room is not what they've been talking about. And guess what? If we take all those new billions of dollars and do what we've always done, we're going to get the same results we've always gotten. I want to challenge you to imagine a community that we control. Imagine creating an economy where neighborhoods are self-sustaining. Imagine an economy where when you live in a community, that it is a community that says, okay, what do you need? You need food? We got food over here. What do you need? You need work? We can help you get training over here. Where the community is taking care of its own. I want you to visualize with me that we have the power. Guess what? Those people we elect, they're not smarter than us. They're not smarter than us. They're not more visionary. They're not more visionary than we are. They're not more committed to the community than we are. Guess what? The only thing they have that we don't have is a whole lot of money that gets them elected. But we have something they will never have. We are a community of compassionate people. We are a community that will not stand for anyone in our community going without. And we are the ones that can develop the stimulus package that works for the people in this community. We need to be talking to our elected officials now and saying, you're not thinking big enough. You're not thinking broad enough. You're not thinking inclusive enough. And so each person in this room can do it, right? Whether you are in your faith-based organization, whether you're in your place of employment, whether you're in your neighborhood association, it is your responsibility to say, who is not in this room? And why aren't they? And we cannot move forward until they are here. That's the power of community organizing. That's the power of being really clear about what your expectations are from your government, from your community, from your people. That is what we have to do. Because guess what? We can do this. We have all the tools. We have really smart people in our community. We can work together to make sure that as those dollars start flowing, that we are helping decide where those dollars go, who gets those jobs, where the training is. Because we've seen it before, right? We've seen training dollars come down, and then all the promises come with it, right? We're going to get people employed, we're going to get them trained, and then the dollars disappear. People have gone through training programs, and do they have a living wage job? No. Do they have something that's going to sustain them long-term in their community? No. It is our job to make sure that that does not happen again. Do not allow our politicians to get away with doing the same stupid stuff they've always done. The power of knowing your neighbors, the power of stopping people and asking them, what do you think should be taking place in this economic recovery? The challenge of going up to people who don't look like you and asking them what their experience has been in this economic crisis is what's going to build the movement. And let me tell you, the next major movement we build, we better have people of color, we better have youth, we better have union members, we better have everybody standing side by side. Because guess what? For the last 30 years, they've been selling us a bill of goods and we bought it. Right? And then guess what? As soon as the economic downturn came, all of us suffered. Right? Didn't matter whether you were black, brown, white, didn't matter what your skin color was, all of us are feeling this right now today. And we thought we were safe because we had a good union job, we had a living wage job, we thought we were okay, right? It's and jobs are disappearing. Living wage jobs are disappearing. The ones that we thought would be there indefinitely are gone. We cannot allow our government to rebuild what didn't work in the first place. So I want to challenge you when you leave this place, this is just the beginning. This is the beginning of us deciding the kind of community we want to build. And guess what? We're starting from the ground up because it's already messed up. And so we can't do any worse than the politicians have done before. I know that the people in this room are the beginning of a movement that will create a community that will be sustainable for our grandkids. We have the power to do that. You, I, all of us together, we can make this happen. So I want to encourage you, when you leave here today, think about this as the beginning. And so I don't know when we're going to come back together as a big group, but I suspect we're going to do that soon. But when we come back as a bigger group, we're going to need a bigger place. Because guess what? There's going to be 4 times the people that were here this time.
People that we may not have built relationships with before, diverse communities different from our own, and we'll start building that network that will be able to take on the whole power. And I also believe that we'll be seeing each other in the next few months and the months to come, whether it's fighting for the Employee Free Choice Act, for single-payer health care, for the Trade Act. We will probably be seeing each other, I hope, at mini town hall meetings in different neighborhoods where we can really get to know each other even more. Mini town halls and union halls where we can bring these ideas and bring diverse relationships together. Maybe we'll be seeing each other fighting against foreclosures and fighting to have a moratorium on foreclosures in Portland. Together, and I think we will be doing them together. JoeAnn said about the next meeting. The next meeting to push things along, I want to invite everybody to this. It's Next Steps, and it's in your program. It's already in your program. But I also want to tell you, in case you have a pencil and want to write it down, we're going to have a next meeting, and we're going to be bringing up some concrete proposals of things that we can do together. Things that we are already doing together will be brought up, and some new things that we can do together. It's going to be on Wednesday, February 18th, because we knew that people would want to get together pretty soon. We didn't want to do it tomorrow, though. So Wednesday, February 18th at 6:30 at the Service Employees Union Hall, which is on Southeast 26th, a little bit south of Powell Boulevard. If you have other ideas, bring them. If you have ideas about this event today and issues or concerns or questions or inspiration from today, bring them to this meeting. Be part of the Next Steps. And now I just want to say, people have talked about the people who have made this day possible. It was virtually a volunteer effort of a group of people dedicated to making this happen. We were always heartened by the fact that everyone seemed to like the idea of having a Portland town hall on the economic crisis. But a lot of people worked on this, and it's more than thanking people. I want to acknowledge that it's the beginning of the kind of world, an example of the kind of world that we want to create, all the democratic decision-making discussions and actions that we took. Just some specifics. I want to thank all of the people who made presentations. They were excellent. And resource people in the breakout sessions. People work hard on it. The translators, people translating all day long. We're really not thanking the people who are furniture, and as I said earlier, send DVDs maybe around the country to other Shots of Justice chapters and other groups. A special thanks also to Greg Margolis and all the crew of people who have produced the reception that's downstairs. We have to go to some. They got the food from all kinds of places, and all the people who bake cookies too. And thanks to everybody here who participated, all of you. Take some time to eat downstairs, to meet new friends, to meet old friends, and also keep in mind that what we want to be doing is signing up. Sign yourselves up on different lists downstairs. There's lots of organizations. Be organized and build solidarity, and we'll see each other again.